Good morning, everyone. I am informed by our warden, Gwen Kopka, that we have a quorum in place. Therefore, I hereby call the 154th annual meeting of St. John's Episcopal Church in Gloucester, Massachusetts, to order. Let us pray. Almighty and ever-living God, source of all wisdom and understanding, be present with we who take counsel in St. John's Church for the renewal and mission of your church. Teach us in all things to seek first your honor and glory. Guide us to perceive what is right, and grant us both the courage to pursue it and the grace to accomplish it, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the 153rd annual meeting, which are included in the annual report. Having been moved, is there any discussion, including any corrections? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. Next item is the report of the Nominating Committee. I'll turn it over to Astrid F. Klinteberg, our other warden, for the presentation of the slate of the Nominating Committee.
So the presentation of the slate is as follows, and I should say that we will be requesting, and I'm sort of receiving, a motion to amend, but Warden Paul McGeary, Clerk Jeffrey Pope, Treasurer Karen Casper, Vestry Joan Gorga, Coyote Lewis, Lynn Runnels, Delegate to Diocesan Convention, Rick Britton and Jonathan Pope, alternate to Diocesan Convention, Sarah Stotzer, Delegate to the North Shore Deanery, Naomi Astek, and Rick Britton. We, of course, would request an amendment to add Gwen Kopka as warden. Do I hear a second? Do we have...
Is there any discussion on the amendment?
Any discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, I will move the amended slate to the floor. Are there nominations from the floor? No takers? We'll close the nomination. I would entertain a motion to accept the slate as amended. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
This is a point of order. The elections become effective at the adjournment of the annual meeting. You're so close. You can almost taste it. The next item on the agenda is committee and guild reports with any questions or discussion. Are you speaking in reference to that or to the slate of nominations? You don't know all the people. Okay, well, everyone who has been nominated and now voted in, please stand. There are a few people who could not be present this morning. Coyote Lewis is attending a work obligation he can't get out of. And Jeffrey Pope. Oh, all right. Well. Okay, thank you. And in a way, that's wonderful that we have, we are looking outside of the core of longtime members and inviting new people into leadership. This brings us to item 4, committee and guild reports, as printed in the annual report. Are there any questions or discussion of any of those reports? Yes, Gwen.
There was an error on the warden's report. I believe it was, what am I speaking to? Oh, I believe it may have been a Freudian slip, but at the end of the warden's report, I noted those people who were leaving the vestry, and I left Elizabeth Redmond out in her treasurer position. I am sure it was a Freudian slip, and I thought if I didn't have it there, it just wouldn't happen. But unfortunately, we will amend that to correct that report.
So I would construe that as a formal request for amendment to be noted in the minutes of this meeting. Norm, could you get the mic to Naomi?
I don't know if this is the time, but I noted on the burials that we forgot Howie Williams, and I was hoping that the clerk would also write that down so that it's acknowledged.
Thank you. We will add that as another formal correction. Oh, Norm?
I have a couple of questions, and there's an omission in the altar guild. Malcolm's name is omitted on the altar guild list.
Okay, so we request that Malcolm Henderson be added to the altar guild.
I'm not quite sure if this is the time to speak of particular things like on page 8, Gwen Kopka suggested links on the website to the Action Shelter Program and the Grace Center, etc. And I wonder, is there any action on that at this point?
I have worked on it, yes. I just haven't been given approval.
Okay.
I have worked on it.
Granted. Approval is granted.
On page 10, on page 10, Astrid noted that the congregation has a recently formed committee chaired by Karen Casper for new member outreach, and I wonder how that's going.
It is ongoing.
I mean, is there a committee? Is there actually a committee?
Is Karen here? Was there a report? Would you like to say a few things about what you've been doing?
Newcomers.
Newcomers. Wait a second.
Thank you. Yes, we did host a dinner of newcomers, and we're trying to gather, we found that was very helpful, having, gathering new people and older parishioners together, trying to get everybody into, see familiar faces. And we're working on a poster on the back to put up about St. John's, and putting out brochures so that everybody that walks in will have everything they need to know about St. John's.
Could you comment for those who don't know about the welcome packet? Because that's quite an excellent.
Yes, there is welcome packets that include everything about you need to know about St. John's, including all the committees, who to contact, and a little bag is given to them with a cup of St. John's and various other little things that go in just to welcome newcomers, so that they get a feel of what St. John's is really all about.
Thank you.
Bear with me a second.
I'm Elizabeth Redmond, I'm the treasurer, and I work pretty closely with Betsy Levick, our parish administrator, on compiling the annual report. And the way it works is that Betsy works from a list of committees that were in the annual report in the prior year. So if she occasionally misses some, because if there's a committee that has emerged that hasn't made itself known, it may not get on the list of people reminded to contribute to the annual report. So might we put in the minutes that somehow there needs to be a concerted effort to really inventory all the currently active committees at the time the annual report is prepared so that we don't miss any. We always miss a couple. Thanks.
On page 21, in the Grace Center report, it says we are open 4 days a week, and I just wanted to report that there was just an email that went out to all of us who work at Grace Center that there are 4 new volunteers who are coming to work on the 5th day of the week. So there are only 4 more new volunteers that are needed to open 5 days a week. That's a triumph.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Does that mean if there's a 5th day that Wednesday will not be the day for Grace Center at St. John's? That it'll move to Friday?
We're talking about that.
Okay, so that hasn't been decided?
There are a few moving parts we need to figure out, but that is the plan. Other questions or discussion on the committee reports? Very well. Then we move to item 5, financial reports. Elizabeth, take it away.
So I have the dubious distinction of having the part of the agenda that was summarized as blah, blah, blah. And if we share that attitude, and I don't believe that we do, it's because we don't love our numbers sufficiently. We talked about love this morning, and actually we can love our numbers because numbers are symbols, and we're people who live amongst symbols and worship with symbols. And numbers, the numbers in our budget, are symbols of faith and commitment and priorities and energy. So I think if we embrace them in that way, they tell the tale of where we've been and where we are and where we might go. So there is a lot of detail in the annual report, and you received a link to a PDF version, and you can also pick up, I believe there are more hard copies in the office. So you can read it in detail. I'm just going to give kind of a big picture overview. It's not new news that we operate as a larger parish than we truly are. We have a very robust program. We have a beautiful building that gives us beautiful worship space and provides space for a lot of community organizations and outreach and activity. It's hopping 7 days a week. That keeps the lights on. We keep the lights on, the heat, the water. It's staffed at various times so that people can get in and out. It's cleaned. The walks are shoveled, the driveway, the parking lot, we have a huge parking lot that gets plowed. So all of that costs money. We have a 3/4-time rector. We have a rectory and all the benefits that come with a rectorship. We have a robust music program with a choir and a children's choir and an annual schedule of concerts. Through the Together Now capital campaign, we've added a youth program, and now this year, at the end of the year, a nursery. And we have outreach ministries here, Grace Center you've heard about. We have meals programs, harvest meals on Tuesdays. We make sandwiches for the Action Shelter on the weekend. Many community groups meet here, all at no charge. So this is our ministry and our mission, and it costs a little bit under $300,000 a year. I'm rounding here just to make it easier. So our expenses are about $300,000 a year. Our income comes in around $250,000 a year. Again, this is in round numbers. So we have what's called a structural deficit, meaning it's not the result of a bad year, it's just the way we're built right now, and that structural deficit is about $50,000 a year. So if you look at the ways to close that gap, the average pledge for 2016, you can read in the annual report, we have 72 pledges for 2016. They average out to $1,810 apiece. Now that's an average, some are more, some are less. So that's about $150 a month. So you have 72 households paying about $150 a month. To close the gap, we'd need 28 more households at that level, which interestingly works out to an even 100 pledging units. So we're operating with 72, we need 100 to close the gap in the budget, if we're going to close it that way. But the way we've been closing it in recent years is with the energy of the vestry leading the way to say, okay, let's have a fundraiser, or the energy of individual parish members running a fundraiser. In 2015, we did not do a large fundraiser, and we also did not have as robust a pledging as we have for 2016, so in 2015, we had a large deficit of $51,000. Now that was less than what was budgeted. We had budgeted $64,000 and came out at $51,000. And as usual, that's a combination of bringing in more money than expected and spending less than anticipated. So for 2016, we closed the deficit by, the vestry agreed to a $10,000 spring fundraiser. So that's the fundraising goal for a fundraiser to be held in the spring. And the Holiday Fair Committee has a very ambitious revenue goal. I like to tease Gwen about that. They added $2,000 to their goal, and they feel very confident they can make it. And we also will see more proceeds from the thrift shop because it will be open for a longer period in 2016. So the shortfall, what we call the deficit, comes out of the unrestricted endowment. And that's equivalent to spending savings. Our endowment comes from funds given or bequeathed by people, former parish members, or friends of the parish, and they give it with no strings attached. So by vestry policy, however, we put it in the endowment. So basically we say, this is a windfall, we're putting it away in our savings account. Historically, our investment earns about 5% a year over time. That is less than the historical return of the stock market, but that's because our endowment is conservatively invested so that the bottom doesn't go as low as the stock market sometimes does. So we consider a 4.5% annual spend to be sustainable, meaning if we used 4.5% of the total return every year, the principal would be preserved and would in fact grow a little. Any spending that we do beyond that 4.5% erodes the principal. So this year, if you do the math on the decrease in the amended, that'd be great, thanks. In the amended endowment committee report, Bob Stewart prepared an amended endowment committee report, which came out a few days later than the first one. You'll see about a $90,000 decrease in the balance of the endowment. And that's a combination of a bad year in the stock market, our total, thank you. Sorry to be froggy. The total return was down about 3% this year. As we know, the stock market met some choppy seas towards the end of the year. And then we took out, $51,000 beyond what was considered a sustainable draw. On the other hand, we had a bequest come in this year. Arlene Wilson very generously provided for us in her will, and we received a bequest of $20,310, which went into the endowment. So at the end of the day, really the decrease in the endowment balance pretty much reflects our spending because Arlene's bequest essentially offset the decrease in the market. So there is a philosophical argument about whether this is a disaster to be spending the endowment or not. There is certainly a legitimate belief that one should present balanced budgets every year and never tap one's savings. We had a consultant who came a few years ago and told us that use of the endowment principle, is living off dead people in the past, and that's a bad thing. And I actually don't feel that way, because I feel like the financial resources that have been left to us by previous generations are a reflection of the communion of saints. And as we worship with past believers on a Sunday morning, we share with them in the ongoing stewardship of this place. So I think it's always a better year when we take less out of the endowment. In 2014, we only took $9,000 out, and that felt really good, and that was a result of some extraordinary generosity on the part of some individual parish members, and also fundraising. Excuse me. But, so, there has to be faith in this as well. There's always faith that there will be more additions to the endowment. We know of a few bequests that have been made, come to think of it, including one, my own modest bequest. Don't plan to go anywhere right away, but the idea is that, if you have life insurance or something, what's the harm in peeling off 10 or 15,000 of it that your kids don't need and making a bequest that will come along down the line? So there continues to be a dialogue about the deficit, and we did look this year at could we cut expense to get rid of that $50,000 deficit, because that's what a balanced budget would entail at this point. You either increase income or you cut expense. We analyzed the sort of major chunks of expense here: the building, the staff, the music program, administrative expenses like the copy machine. They kind of fall together in groups, and we really felt, I feel personally, I guess I'll speak for myself, that to cut $50,000 out of that budget would be like taking a leg off of a four-legged animal. It's kind of a whole, what we do here. Right now, we have a program that we value, and we value all the parts of it. At least no one's been willing to offer one up to get rid of. And I think, and again, this is my personal belief, we're kind of engaged in a preservation effort here. We're creating something that's countercultural, maintaining something that's countercultural, and sometimes you have to spend a little bit more on preservation as a value in itself. I think if you created this from scratch today, it probably wouldn't look like this. So I do think we need to continue to look strategically at our expenses. If we are to engage in major cuts, we need to understand, what we're cutting, how does that relate to our mission? So we need a clearly articulated mission and vision, an understanding of what our critical ministries are, so that if there is an effort to make cuts, we understand what the result would be. And the vestry has talked about a strategic planning effort in the coming year, although there are many, many items on the vestry's agenda. I just wanted to cover a couple of specific events of note in the current year. One is Arlene Wilson's bequest. As I said, that was about $20,000 and went into the endowment. We also this year created what we're calling the pooled restricted endowment. So as I said before, what we've called the endowment all along is unrestricted funds, which are really ours to use according to policy set by the vestry. We do have some small amounts of money that the principal is restricted by donors, meaning we can't ever spend the principal. We've had two funds right along, the Beach and Ballard funds, which together totaled around $8,000. And they had long been held in passbook accounts where they were not earning really anything to speak of. This year, Ed Parks, early in the year, gave us a $5,000 gift to make possible the annual purchase of flowers in memory of Florence and Sumner Parks. You can see a little bit more about that in the annual report. And then Chuck Everett's sons contributed $1,200 to create an annual flower fund in memory of Sherry. So we pooled all that together, and we now have a vehicle within the endowment, but separate from the endowment, that will spend at the 4.5% rate. We would never deficit spend out of that pool of money, and that will fund things like flowers for those two named memorial gifts, and then the Beach and Ballard funds are for altar furnishings and cloths and whatnot. So now we can accept new contributions to that. So if you have someone you'd like to make a permanent memorial, say for annual flowers, a minimum gift would be $1,000 to contribute to that. And of course, smaller memorial gifts can always be made and will go into the memorial fund, which is used annually. I wrote a lot of thank yous in the annual report. I particularly like to thank Betsy Levick. I tried to encourage her to come here, but she said she hadn't been to one annual meeting yet, and she wasn't, I guess she decided not. I guess she decided not to start, but we really rely on her to keep everything tracked. As Bret said, it's complicated tracking all these special funds and special projects. I'd like to mention Carolyn Stewart, who got me into this to start with. In 2011, she said, would you be willing to help out a little bit with the finances? And here I am. And I especially want to thank Chuck Everett. That was an unexpected project to wind up working closely with Chuck for a couple of years, and it was delightful, and I learned a lot, not just about church finance. And I want to especially, and I want to thank Karen Casper and Sue Lupo for stepping up and learning the ropes. So I feel totally comfortable that, you know, our bookkeeping will stay on track. And I feel confident that the vestry will continue to look at this issue of the deficit. And I would be happy to entertain any questions, either now or individually. Not a one?
Mr. Chairman, or what, I don't quite know what to call you in your status in the annual report. However, I wish to speak to the fact that in the years that I've been here since 1989, we have had several treasurers, but I can't think of one that has exceeded the talents of our present treasurer, and I mourn her departure, but certainly thank her for everything she's done.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure to work with every one of you and get to know you well in this process. And I just want to leave you with the thought that the budget does represent faith, hope, and love. And what? And you know, don't think of it as just dry and boring and tedious. It really is a message about kind of our lifeblood and how it's flowing. So thank you.
Wait, I just want to say one other thing, and thank you for your acknowledging my role in bringing you into this. There are several things I'm proud of about my former tenure as a warden. One is that, and the other is hiring Betsy Levick, which is the best hire I ever made. So thank you, Elizabeth.
That brings us to the next item on our agenda, other business and general discussion. The floor is now open for any comments or questions on any topic related in some way to St. John's Episcopal Church.
I should have done this during the committee reports, but you were a little too fast for me. There is an addendum to the annual report from a group called the Housing Committee, of which I am chair, and the other members are Chuck Everett and Len Berry and Bret, and who am I forgetting? Somebody. Anyway. We are beginning, and it's just in the initial stages, looking into the possibility of perhaps creating some affordable housing in our parking lot space. We have received a city grant, in addition to a grant from the Episcopal City Mission in the amount of $10,000. And we are going to be using that to fund an initial feasibility study to see if it's even worth pursuing. So I just want to call it to your attention because it wasn't in the original report. It is in the addendum, and I'm happy to take any questions about that later on as the process progresses. But it is the very initial stages. We hope to award a contract for the feasibility study itself by April 1st, and then we'll see where we go from there. Thank you.
This might be a new record of some kind. Okay, thank you. Thank you. The silence was deafening.
I don't know that you know that I have another role here, and I'm assistant to the bishop. Now you have to understand which bishop I am assistant to. She sits right here. And I come in on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursday mornings and do what I call scut work, which is folding programs and filling envelopes and so forth. But I also have a chance to observe all that the bishop does. And a bit of it is in your annual report, in her 3 or 4 very short things. But it is remarkable. It is a remarkable service, and I'm amazed at it. And I just want you to know she's certainly a big piece of why St. John's is admired in the community and serves it so well. Thank you.
May you all be, when you reach at the age of 91, be like her. I can't even get into the church at 6:30 in the morning before her. She is there 7 o'clock. She's flying in. I can't even keep up with her. So there you are. It's quite a team.
The usual expression is people who wear a lot of hats. I don't know what expression I would use, but Gwen, you wear a lot of hats, and you are doing a fantastic job. You did this year wear so many hats, and they were gorgeous, and you did a wonderful job. And I commend you for all you have taken on. A lot of work this year for you. Thank you.
I would like to just point out that I've been in a lot of churches over my lifetime, and this church is so unique in its music program. And I don't know where Mark is. Is he here? No.
He can probably hear, though.
But his service, ta-da, to this church. Now that we have barely adequately embarrassed him, I also want to commend the choir. I mean, no more loyal group of people exist in this church. And what you all are able to do is astonishing. And also the congregation. Have you guys ever been in a church that sang like this congregation sings? I mean, it's really unique. So it's something that's part of the magic of this parish, and I just wanted to acknowledge that.
just like to commend Cecily for all the work that she's done with the Grace Center and how well she's kept us educated and on the ball here. Thank you. Thank you, Cecily.
I'd like to comment. One of the things that really couldn't come up in too much detail in the reports was something I was part of, but also observing this year, was that we had some really deep and meaningful and challenging family situations in the parish related to elders who had to move, people had to relocate, people whose whole kind of expectations in where they would be at the end of their life were tossed up in the air. And when I watch what happened with John Cobb and Mary Freer and them getting relocated and our having a service over there and Bret going over and we bringing communion and sometimes coming over with communion and then talking tough and then other times coming over as we said goodbye, and then everything that I think Jim alluded to about Bill Chapin. It's kind of the place I'd like to stay. I joke sometimes that, I joked with Martha sometimes that we're very active in the parish and we fully expect to hang around long enough that people have meetings about what will we do about them. Can't we get them not doing such dangerous things? They shouldn't be down in that Undercroft alone, you know. But at the same time, I know, and this goes way back to Catherine Parks and other people in this church, I know that this parish will go to bat for me. They will talk to people, the powers that be, and say, oh, no, don't worry, there's a whole community around her. She's not as strange as she seems, you know. And, but that's what it means to have a parish family, and I'm grateful for it.
I'd just like to add something to that. I spent a lot of time ministering to my friend Bill Chapin, who would get up and, if he was here today, he'd stand up and say something, because he always would say something at annual meetings, usually to say how great somebody else is. And but I kind of got into a relationship with Bill that was sort of a mission for me, and it was really rewarding. It lasted right up until the end of his life. But the reason why I did that was because of all the Sundays that I've been in this room here, listening to just the many examples of what we can do for people. I mean, it happened over a period of time, watching other people do this for other people. People like Gwen and Malcolm working with John Cobb and Mary Freer. And it's proof to me that the Spirit moves among us, and it really works, and just keep coming back on Sundays, folks.
I just want to follow up on what the other Gwen, said, and point out that I am also extremely grateful for this being a parish that also takes care of its youngest members, and as the mother of most of the youngest members, and as a single mother, I'm eternally grateful. Thank you for all of the work and effort you put into making sure that we have a vibrant youth program here through the music, through the ministry, through having Jay upstairs right now with my children, keeping them entertained and informed. Thank you.
Okay, then that brings us to section 7 on the agenda, acknowledgements. Well, yeah, there are a couple of items that we don't forget. I want to offer my personal thanks and appreciation to everyone who has volunteered for any role, office, or ministry, great or small, visible or invisible, official or unofficial. We have such an active and dedicated and very fine congregation that we are able to accomplish a great deal more than an outsider might expect by simply the metrics of our congregation. You all, every single person in this room, volunteered to make St. John's the church that it is. So when I write sermons about the body of Christ, the manifestation of the Holy Spirit in the world, your volunteering, your ministry is what's inspiring those words, and I can't thank you enough for that, because writing sermons is really hard. And I'd also like to acknowledge and express my gratitude for those who serve involuntarily, namely our paid staff. Because I don't have to worry about a lot of things that a lot of rectors have to worry about constantly, because I can always count on staff to do a very fine job. Their dedication, professionalism, and commitment to excellence is an extraordinary gift to me and, of course, to the parish as a whole. So I would like to personally thank Marge, Mark, Betsy, and Jay. Keep up the good work. You make me proud. We move on to item 7B on the agenda, acknowledgement of departing vestry members.
I have a small gift and a card for people who are leaving the vestry. It was a delight to get these cards around to people, because everyone wanted to sign them, and in very long detail sometimes about what everyone means. Elizabeth, please here. It was more than a Freudian slip that I didn't want her to leave. We are in such better shape, as everyone has said, because of what you've done to us, for us, and with teaching us and creating an understanding, a lack of fear of those numbers. You've done it beautifully, and you're a wonderful Christian woman, and I want to thank you, and I want to thank her. She's done Martha, would you come up? I can't hold it. Come on. Martha's going off the vestry, and it's going to break my heart, because I've just really come on. It takes a year to learn it. And then the second year, you know what you're doing, maybe, and then you go off. So just keep that in mind. Martha has more ideas than, I'd like to find a great metaphor for this, but I can't. We asked for ideas for fundraising or brainstorming at a meeting, and the rest of us bring one or two, thought out. Martha brings lists, an embarrassment of riches. And she's thought them all out, and something comes up like the magical moment when a person on the vestry said, we need a nursery. And Bret, I don't know how it went, but Bret said, well, I have an office that has a guy. And Martha says, well, there's a door right there, and you can cut that off, and you can do that. And within, it took us a little while to get going, but to get the staffing, but within a week we could have had that all set up. She knows where everything is. She knows where, not the skeletons in the closet, but all the good bits. She knows where everything is. And I'm going to miss you terribly on this festival. But this frees up time for Martha to do some of her other ideas. Thank you very much. Naomi's been ill, so we're just so glad you're back. You're marginally in an upright position. So, what I learned from Naomi this year is a phrase she used a number of times, which was, "This is not my comfort zone." It was wonderful, and yet, what she taught me was that I can step out of my comfort zone as well and enter a remarkable place. So, thank you. But I learned that when I come in early on Sunday, if I come in early on Sunday, racing and for choir,
think of Lynn if you have a munchkin. I tried to get in. I got in at 7:30. How early is it? But she had already gone. The munchkin there. So we're going to leave her something. Her life is in transition, and she works up the line. And all I can say to her in her card is that the beautiful artwork that we have sitting around in different places, heads of animals and things like that, we remember her whenever we see her. So come up here, buddy, warden colleague. Put down your name. So, Husband dear, thank you very much for being my introduction to wardening. It was a kick. You're one of the most brilliant people I know. And I'll tell you, one of the visions I have from being in the back of the church here was Astrid. One time we had a service, and there was a man who had stayed overnight in the church, and he was still slightly dozing on the back pew there. And all of us were trying to be polite, but trying to be more. Astrid just sidled right on up, gently woke him up, walked to the place where you get. I have never seen someone just step into Christian love in action the way this woman does. So, thank you very much. It strikes me that so many of the strengthening and positive things that were said here are due to the growth we are experiencing in ourselves and are evolving as who we are thanks to Bret. Bret allows us to do what we want, encourages us to take and run with it, and does not have a big ego about it. So I thank you very much.
Almighty and ever-living God, ruler of all things in heaven and earth, hear our prayers for this parish family. Strengthen us, arouse us, restore us. Grant us all things necessary for our common life, and bring us all to be of one heart and mind within your holy church. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. We are adjourned.